Okay, we are live. Gotta let it breathe here just for a second while we bring on the Facebook family here. And we are good. Welcome in, everybody, to the Huddle Up podcast, presented as always by Mile High Huddle, powered by Overtime Media. I'm your host, Chad Jensen. With me, as always, my partner in crime. You know him, you love him. He is my fellow football priest, Zack Kelberman. Zack, you've had some really fire stories the last couple of days. We only briefly scratched the surface on that whole Marcus Mariota conjecture of, bring him over from the Raiders, whatever, from Connor Orr. But the one I want to talk to you about is the Jeudy story that you published today, excuse me, where you basically, you reported and analyzed what he had to say post-game. So with that being said, as we're sitting here in the Aftermath pod, what was the takeaway from Jeudy's own remarks post-game?
I thought for the most part, he did a good job of owning up. And he said, the balls definitely came my way. The targets came my way, and I didn't make the catch. And they were just drops. On one hand, I would have liked him be a little more cliche and be like, listen, I apologize to Locke. I apologize to my teammates. It can't happen again. You like to hear at least somewhat of those platitudes, but he said it's just drops. It's catches I have to make. There's plays I have to make on the field. The one thing that I took out of what he said, because everything else was one line if you look through the transcripts of the quotes, Chad, but when you got to the part about what Locke said to him on the sideline, and this is the leadership of the quarterback of the Broncos right now that goes, it doesn't get a lot of attention, but this is what he went up to Jeudy, who supposedly threw his helmet on the sideline. He had that much frustration. He said, listen, you're going to be great. You're going to have more games like today. You're going to have a lot more positive games, a lot more highlights. You have a great career ahead of you, but don't let this bog you down. Move past it. Have amnesia. And he said, Drew's a great teammate. I really appreciated that. And after he told me, I decided to move on and try to be better. He owned up, he said, it's on me. It's pretty much what you'd expect. And hopefully we see a little more of a mature Jeudy, at least in the final game next week.
Credited with only 5 drops. I say only because I saw 7 out there, and I'd be curious. It's made me curious, Zack, to see how exactly the statisticians out there define a drop. Does it have to be like perfectly on the chest plate to be defined as a drop? Does it, if you're extended, does that negate and you drop it? Does that not count as a drop? I don't know, but the dude dropped 7 balls in my estimation, and a couple of them were really killers, man. They were crucial factors why the Broncos lost that game. Dropped a touchdown, not an easy catch, but similar to that one, I want to say it was the Tampa game that Jeff Driscoll started where he caught one, or excuse me. It was the next game. No, it was week 6 against the Patriots. Drew Lock dropping dimes. Remember, he had like 4 or 5 drops. A couple of them were touchdowns. One was from Jeudy, and it was an over the shoulder in the corner where it's like, hey, man, that's not an easy catch. But if you are truly one of the upper echelon wide receivers in the world, that's a catch you make. And the one on Sunday against the Chargers, Zack, was kind of similar to that, where it wasn't perfect. It wouldn't have been an easy catch, but still a catch you got to make because Drew had to put it up high because of the coverage. You go up, you get it, you tippy toe. That's how a superstar does it in the league.
I mean, how I define it is if it's anywhere in your catch radius, if you get your hands anywhere on it or anywhere near it, you're expected to make the catch, not just as a wide receiver, but as a first-round rookie wide receiver or any other, high-profile, highly touted receiver like Jeudy. He killed the Broncos yesterday. I think he was single-handedly the reason why they lost that game. If he would have made those catches, Chad, some of which were routine. I mean, if you watch the replay, it were just going right through his hands. I did notice, though, and I want to tweet about this. If you see I believe it's the end zone one that he dropped, he jumps right before. He doesn't have to jump. What that signaled to me, it's all, like you said yesterday, all up here. It's all mental for him. There's nothing physically wrong with Jeudy, but when you see a receiver jump before he has to, that's a sign of jitters. That's a sign of a young player not really knowing what to do in that situation, and that could be coached out of him and taught out of him. And fortunately, he has a great position coach in Zach Kelberman. I'm not worried about Jeudy. He's not the B-word bust. And like I wrote in this article, he's going up against another tumultuous first-round receiver in Henry Ruggs, who has had his own drama this year with the offseason getting, stabbed in the thigh or whatever it was, moving stuff, and he hasn't had a lot of catches this year, opportunities. It takes time. I know Broncos fans don't like to hear the P word, which is patience, but you have to have that word before you associate the B word, which is bust. Like Drew Lock said, he has a lot more highlights left to come. The future is very bright, and he will be better because of yesterday.
Yeah, I'm seriously, I mean, it's cause for concern just seeing the depth of the slump that Jeudy's in right now. I mean, it is a little bit worrisome, but in terms of macro, big picture, I'm not worried about Jerry Jeudy being a bust. I mean,
No.
that's definitely jumping the shark. This is a dude that simply, I think he's just kind of stuck in his own head. And I want to pull up here what two lines here. I'll do a share screen so we can all kind of read along, and then we got to jump to some matters of business. Let me change this share screen real quick and go to this quote. Bear with me one second. Here's what Jeudy said. We know what Drew said he said, but here's Judy's interpretation. And Jeudy, of course, anytime he's been put in front of the media, even before his name kind of became mud, I'm talking training camp, early season, he was always very clipped, right? Very short. At one point, following the one game, which game was it now that I think about? It might have been Pittsburgh, might have been the Patriots game. He was almost combative with media. And this is a weird situation because you're in like a virtual press conference. It's not as easy to be combative and kind of juicy, but he was. And so this time, he's still very clipped, doesn't really go too far out on a limb in terms of what he says, but this is interesting. On what Drew Lock told him on the sideline. Quote, Drew was just telling me it's happened to the best, so just keep your head up and just focus on the next play. Close quote. On what it means that Lock, closed ranks around him, had his back. Kept going to him, right? Zach, you reported this today in one of your articles. Jeudy was targeted 15 times. That's the most a Broncos receiver has been targeted in an individual game since 2017, early in that season, and it was Emmanuel Sanders.
Yep.
He kept going. Even on that final drive when they needed a play, he went back to Jeudy. Quote, Drew is a great teammate. He always says the right thing to keep his guys going and motivated. That's a big deal. After he told me that, I told myself, just keep pushing, keep playing. Drops will happen. It happens to some of the best. I can't just dwell on this. I've just got to find ways to fix it, close quote. So, Zach, for those out there, and God bless them, and there's a lot of people I love and respect in this business, from media and also in the fan base, who say, look, Drew Lock's not showing any signs of maturity, no signs of leadership. That's leadership on a plate.
Yep. Yeah, it's exactly why some of us, like you and I, Chad, are more bullish on Drew Lock than some others. And it's a small, you don't want Lock's leadership to come out in a negative way. And in this way, it's his number one receiver for now, kind of throwing a fit on the sideline and him being upset about not having targets. And when he gets them, he's dropping them. You like to see Lock's leadership come out when they're winning, but even in a loss, even in a bad season, he's still going up to his players and rallying troops and being that spark. And for Jerry Jeudy to say that, he was at Alabama with Nick Saban, who preaches accountability and who preaches owning your mistakes. And he's as rigid and more so than Vic Fangio ever was. He makes Vic Fangio look like Club Med, Nick Saban. And you know what? He came to Denver and he's complaining and doesn't have that rock to lean on like Nick Saban. But yet, even when he's kind of going out of that, what he's been taught, out of that mold, he has someone to bring him back like Saban would, and that is his quarterback. And that's what you want to see from a leader in number 3. Again, you wished it was better context. You wish he was catching the passes, and this wasn't even an issue. But I like how Locke resonated with him. He hit home with him. And like you just saw it on the screenshot there, every other answer that Jeudy gave yesterday was 1 or 2 sentences. He was asked about Locke, and it was a paragraph. It speaks volumes about the locker room.
It really does, and it's encouraging, and it just kind of goes to show you that the internal narrative, the internal view on some of these issues, like Drew, is vastly different than the conjecture and some of the criticism and external view of this team. And we're going to get to your questions. We're going to get to your super chats. We're going to get to whatever else is on your mind, and also a few talking points that came out of yesterday's post game, today's availability from Vic Fangio, here in just a second. But first, we got to tip our cap to the sponsor of tonight's live stream pod, sportsbetting.com. As you know, gambling is legal in the state of Colorado. And if you're looking to make watching your favorite sports a little more interesting, Sportsbetting.com is your no-brainer destination. Here's why. 3 things. Number 1, you get the sharp odds, you get the low juice. They have their own in-house bookmakers. You hear us talk about this a lot. That means they're not third-party provider of odds. They manufacture them themselves. That results in reduced juice, better prices. 2, hassle-free bonuses that you can roll over after one time. And then 3, 24/7 live customer support. And it's always a real person in the United States. But the kicker is this. Right now, after you make your first deposit, sportsbetting.com will match it up to $750. So that's $750 in free bet credits. That's real money at sportsbetting.com. Plus, right now, you got the NBA set to tip off. Also get $25 in free bet credits for the NBA. So head on over to sportsbetting.com/milehighhuddle. That's sportsbetting.com/milehighhuddle and capitalize on that $750 in free bet credits and start 2021 off on the right foot. All right, a couple quick other things we'll grab and then dive right back into the content and the conversation. Follow the podcast on Twitter @HuddleUpPod. Follow the main account @MileHighHuddle, which I do not have in sequence here, so give me a second. @MileHighHuddle, pretty easy. While you're at it, follow my partner. Oh, and I do this every time, Zach. I set up and record with Kim Becker, and I forget to put the display names back on every single time. But as you can see, my partner in crime, Zack Kelberman on Twitter, Kelberman NFL. Myself @Chad and Jensen if you want to connect. It's another way to keep the combo going. Also, gentle reminder to check out the merch store. Get a hat, get a t-shirt, get a mug, get a hoodie, little something for everybody. It's another way to support what we're doing here. Also, shout out to our Facebook supporters. Our community, Zach, continues to grow on Facebook at an exponential rate. We are closing in on 100,000 followers in our community on Facebook. We just kicked off, though, this official supporter thing. And up to this point, it's kind of been just people showing out, trying to support, offering financial support to MHH. But starting in January, that financial support is going to come with some significant, and when I say significant, perks, I mean it. And we're going to roll that out the first week of January. Myself, Zach, some of the other pod hosts, Kim Becker. It's going to be great. So if you want to support what we're doing here on Facebook, you just click the big blue button on our page. You're in like Flynn. And if you're not in a position to do these 3 things, these 3 things you can do. Everyone listening, subscribe, like this video. And if Zach and I are doing a good job, share it out there. Help us continue to grow and reach new like-minded Broncos fans just like you. Everyone's noticing the light. Chad looks crisper. Indeed. This is a new light setup. If you were to see, I'll show you this. The previous LED light I used was like about that big, and it was right in front of me, right in front of my computer.
Yes.
The one I got now, it's almost like surround that my wife got me for Christmas, so it's much better. It's something I've been needing. I've been putting off and procrastinating for a long time. She took care of it. That's why you got to marry up, gang. Kenneth Booker jumping in. Appreciate you, my friend. Good to see you. He says, was Jeudy playing against himself on fantasy, Zach?
He might have had some stake in the game. He might have used sportsbetting.com/
That's right. Tom El Greco up there, north of the 49th parallel. Good to see you, my friend. 2 superstars right off the bat. Tom says, Jeudy was caught for speeding. Charges were dropped. LMAO. Indeed. Appreciate it.
It's like the new Juwan James meme. It was Garrett Bowles, and it was Juwan James, and now it's Jerry Jeudy. There's always one.
David, appreciate those stars, my friend.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, John will keep an eye out for you in the stream, and we'll get you there. Let's take a question from Savage Boy over on Twitch. We're trying to give more attention to our Twitch following. Savage Boy Kev over there. He says, could we get a trade of Patrick? Could we trade Patrick and a couple of picks for T.Y. Hilton? Your answer is that.
Why? I mean, he's Courtland Sutton light. I mean, he still has way more of a ceiling than T.Y. Hilton does. And if you want T.Y. Hilton for his game-breaking speed or whatever's left of that, you have that in KJ Hamler and Jerry Jeudy, and you're getting Courtland Sutton back next year. So I would pay TP before I consider trading TP.
John, do you have Based Gase and Chase Wellner? Here's a question, though, from David, who's given us some stars over there on Facebook. Thanks, my friend. He says, do you think they will go QB with the first pick in the draft? I highly doubt it, but I did see that on Facebook. Look, one of the fun things about what's going to start this time next week, all right, is the speculation of the offseason. And we'll know a little bit more kind of what Elway's thinking when the season ends and he has his end of season press conference. But I think what fans are going to hear from Elway is that, look, Drew was up, he was down, but what we've seen overall encourages us that we're on the right track with Drew, that he just needs more time on task. We're going to give him a full offseason. You're going to get all those talking points, Zach. And I think the idea of taking a quarterback in the first round is going to go bye-bye pretty quickly. But then again, hey, I've been wrong before. I don't think the Broncos are going quarterback in the first round, but we'll see.
Well, let's look at it realistically. The Broncos have three options. They can go into next year with the current setup pretty much. Lock, you can bring back Driscoll, you can have Brett Rippon, or you can bring in a veteran and have Lock, or you can bring back Lock and have a rookie with him. I think it's door number 3. I know you think it's door number 2 with a veteran. Regardless, though, I don't see a quarterback in the first round. This question is always prefaced by me saying who's on the board when they go on the clock. Is if a quarterback falls, if Trey Lance falls or Zach Wilson falls to them, wherever they end up picking, they have a conversation to think about. But if they're dead set on Lock, you got to go tackle, inside linebacker, cornerback, maybe safety. You got to address other areas on the roster. If they go the young route, I see it in the second or third round. I do not see a first-round quarterback.
Nelson, your boy Matt, you tell him to reach out to Chad and Zach. We'll give him some props. We'd love to hear from him. That's what we're talking about. Word of mouth, dude. Nelson saying, hey, I'm glad I caught this pod. My buddy turned me on to you guys. That's what we want to hear. That's what we want to see. Good to have you, Nelson. And we tip our cap to Matt. Based Gase, good to see you, my brother. Bonafide superstar. He says, if we want to play comparisons like we do with Locke, Devontae Adams had drop issues early on in his career. Jerry isn't a bust. Zach Azzani, the wide receivers coach, will fix him in 2021. That's a really good comparison in terms of, giving you a real example of a relatively high drafted wide receiver, had some struggles, bounced back in a big bad way.
There's a billion of those examples as well. But I think on yesterday's show, one was brought up to us that was pretty relevant to Denver's interest, and that's Noah Fant. And in his first year, Noah Fant had the dropsies. Noah Fant wasn't being a secure ball catcher, and he improved in year 2, and now he looks like he has Pro Bowl upside. I have no doubt that Azzani is the one to not even to fix Jeudy, just to coach this negative mental miscue out of him. And once that happens, his physical talent will take over, his route running, and he will be much, much better in 21. Mark my words.
I don't know who Facebook user is, but let me give you a tip. If you're on Facebook and you put in a question and then we go to answer it and it just shows Facebook user, that's because you didn't give StreamYard permission to show your profile. So what you do is at the top of the stream, right under where you see the video box, there's some information telling you what we're going to be talking about today, a few links. One of them is how to give that permission. So next time your name shows up in the stream. So whoever you are, thanks for the question. We'll take it though. It says, good evening, Priest. So where do you think we go from here? If Zach Wilson falls into our laps, the BYU quarterback, do you take him, Zach?
I think, a lot of this also is determined by what Elway and Matt Russell think of Zach Wilson, the quarterback, and we won't know that until the pre-draft process plays out. And they always tip their hand with the combine visits, and then they have personal interviews and exclusive meetings and stuff like that. Again, though, it's what Elway wants to do, and I'm less inclined to believe he wants to blow it all up and give up on Drew Lock and have a first-round quarterback take over next year. It depends on how much they like him. I happen to think Zach Wilson is the QB2 in this draft class, so if he falls to, let's say, 11, 12, I might think about it, but like I mentioned, they have other holes throughout the roster. They can be better served taking a cornerback or an inside linebacker, maybe getting a quarterback later in the draft.
I like Zach Wilson. If you didn't have Drew, I'd say go see what you can do to get Wilson. But in my opinion, they're actually pretty similar quarterbacks. And I haven't studied a ton of film on Wilson quite yet. Hope to get to that when the season finally ends. But I don't really see it as a realistic option at this point. We'll see what Elway says, though. Next Monday, literally a week from today, we'll get the end-of-season presser from Elway. Caleb says, hey, man, if Jerry single-handedly is the reason we lost, then I'll buy the guy dinner on me. Zach said almost single-handedly. But let me put some context to that, okay? If Jerry Jeudy catches the touchdown, reshapes the entire flow of that game. If Jerry Jeudy catches the seam on the final possession that ended in Lock heaving one up for a Hail Mary, that's a field goal. You're one more throw away from an easy, right, I should say, average field goal try for Brandon McManus. You're probably tying the game going to overtime. So did he single-handedly lose the game? There was a lot of factors. Drew's interception early, the defense allowing Justin Herbert to go down the field on his final possession and score that field goal after the Broncos tied it up. You can point the fingers in a lot of directions, but Jerry Jeudy, Zach, he shares in terms of the point of attack, the big key moments as the game went along that resulted in the Broncos getting that 10th loss of the season.
You know, I had an argument all planned out for why Jerry Jeudy single-handedly did cost the Broncos the game, but I dropped it. Just wanted to put that out there. No, listen, he dropped at least 5 balls. If Drew Lock would have thrown 5 interceptions, would you say he single-handedly lost the game? If Melvin Gordon fumbled 5 times, would you say he single-handedly lost the game? So it's a team sport for sure. And just like it all wasn't on Drew Lock when they lost, this wasn't all on Jerry Jeudy, but he literally took points off the board when he dropped that touchdown, and like you mentioned, dropped that long seam pass, would have set up a McManus field goal, would have tied the game. You never know what could happen from there. When 1 or 2 drops, you're not the GOAT. When you drop 5, 6, 7 balls, you are the GOAT, and it's indisputable.
Big E brings up a really good point. I'd love to see this. He says, Drew Lock and Jerry Jeudy need to go out and do what Peyton Manning and Marvin Harrison used to do every time one of them dropped the ball, or man, in every drop the ball, every throw they would do 100 times in a row. I mean, that might be, I guess, hey, man, that was a championship work ethic. It might seem extreme, but look, Peyton Manning and Marvin Harrison, probably one of the, if not the top QB wide receiver combo of all time. So there are some lessons to be learned there. But either way, Zach, Drew Lock, Jerry Jeudy, I think they have the bro chemistry. I do think that they're friends, and I do think they have mutual respect. But the chemistry as players, that's just not there yet. So that's got to be one of each of them. If Drew does get tapped to be the guy next year, that's got to be one of the top priorities of the offseason.
Well, I mean, aside from Marvin Harrison shooting someone, wherever he did, he was also a way more mature guy at that stage of his career. So it's really not fair comparing Marvin Harrison and Jerry Jeudy. I understand it'd be like more Reggie Wayne and Peyton Manning than Jerry Jeudy and Drew Lock. But listen, they need time together. They didn't have an offseason. They didn't have a preseason. And again, Jerry Jeudy wasn't supposed to be the guy. He was supposed to have Courtland Sutton to lean on and take the pressure off of him as a number 1 guy. This will all get evened out. Winning cures all. And I think next year, as Chad does as well, the Broncos will be much better quarterbacking, better coaching, and better wide receiver play because they'll have Courtland Sutton back in the fold.
Chase Wellner, good to see you, a longtime listener, superstar in this community. He says, not making excuses for Jerry, but is there something to him adjusting from Tua to Drew? Tua being lefty, Drew throwing right, and with more velocity. I think maybe early there might have been some issues catching balls that spin with the, so I guess when it's a right hand, it spins counterclockwise. If it's left, it's spinning the other way. So maybe there's something to that, but I think that probably got ironed out, Chase, to be frank with you, pretty early in training camp.
Yeah, I mean, catching a football is catching a football. If you watch what DeAndre Hopkins does on a daily or a weekly basis, you'd be amazed. His job is to catch it, and no matter who's throwing it, no matter the spin, right-handed, left-handed, you can't drop 6 passes. You can't do it.
Kenneth Booker jumping in again. Appreciate you, my friend. He says, this season is a wake-up call for Jeudy. He'll work his butt off this offseason and come back better than ever next year. I am inclined to agree with you that you're going to – it won't be too long from now that people will look back on this and go, man, remember that? Jerry Jeudy was known for the drops, and now he's one of the top playmakers in the league. That's going to happen. And one of the things that will help him, we've talked about getting the chemistry with Drew, but just quarterback consistency. Not every pass that Drew – I mean, if you look at it, Zach, it's pretty ugly. Is it 91 targets to 41 receptions? I want to look at this real quick, but the catch to target ratio for Jerry Jeudy is just abysmal. And I think a big part of that is he's really, I don't mean to take onus off of him or take any of the accountability off of Jeudy, but he has dealt with quarterback inconsistency. And I don't just mean going from Drew to Jeff Driscoll to Brett Rippon and then back to Drew. But I mean, even since Drew returned in week 6, Zach, you've seen the ups and the downs. You've seen the flashes, and then you've seen the depredations from Drew. So as Drew continues to develop, what I'm getting at, you'll see that benefit Jerry Jeudy in a lot of ways too.
And he also has an offensive coordinator who doesn't seem to know how to utilize the weapons that he has. I mean, one week it's Noah Fant, the next week it's KJ Hamler, the next week it's Jeudy. If he gets that consistency down, we love that word around here, consistency, from his quarterback and lock and his coaching staff and Pat Shurmur, I think he has a better season, and he doesn't drop as many passes because he'd be in more of a rhythm. He'd have more confidence with which to work. Next year, though, I don't think this is a bold take. I'm going to say it right now. If the quarterbacking is even average or just consistent, again, reliable, I think Jerry Jeudy is a 1,000-yard receiver next season. I think him.
Sorry, go finish your thought. I thought you were done.
I was just going to say, I think if all things being equal, if they have good quarterback play, they have 3,000-yard receivers next year. It's Sutton, Noah Fant, and Jerry Jeudy.
How awesome would that be? Now look here. This is what I was talking about. The target. Now I was going off of memory from going into Week 16, but this is coming out of Week 16. You got 106 targets for Jerry Jeudy. That's enormous. I think for most wide receivers, if you get targeted 106 times, you're probably somewhere around the low 70s, high 60s on reception.
For sure.
So look at him. He's chilling at 47 for the year, 716 yards. So, that's bad. And I think the television broadcast on Sunday, Zach, did a pretty good job of illustrating his poor target to catch ratio. Something that, look, he's got to take accountability and responsibility for that.
Oh, yeah.
And resolve to fix it.
I'd be interested, though, like, what's CeeDee Lamb's or Justin Jefferson? Like, what's their, just as a comparison to Jerry Jeudy, that does seem really low. I mean, that's a lot of targets for a guy complaining for more.
Yeah, let me take a quick look here. I'll pull up CD, and then we'll pull up Justin Jefferson. We'll follow along here. Bear with me one second, gang. I got the tab ready to roll. There's CD. CeeDee Lamb, for what it's worth, and you guys can remember this. This was the guy I wanted, and the Broncos could have taken him, but they wanted Jeudy. So here's what I mean. 104 targets. What was Jeudy? 106? Yeah, 106. 69 receptions. That's about where you would expect it to be. So catch percentage over here, 66.3. For Jeudy, it's 44.3. Horrendous. Who else did you say? Jefferson?
Yeah.
Let's just take a look since he made the Pro Bowl, right? Let me scroll back out real quick. By the way, Pro Football Reference, God bless him. Jefferson. Let's grab him real quick. All right, so he's chilling at 113. Look at that catch. 113 targets, 79 receptions. His catch percentage, 70%.
Wow.
So that's about where, the truly, the good wideouts in this league, that's about where you need to be.
Yeah, I have to eat some crow on Jefferson as well. I didn't think he would match up with the big three receivers, and he's been just dynamite. Even with Kirk Cousins over there in Minnesota, I mean, the guy is just phenomenal.
Absolutely. All right, let's I want to turn the page just for a second from all the Jeudy talk, and I want to go to something Vic Fangio had to say today. Let me pull it up. And John, I don't know if we have another super that we can get queued up while I'm pulling this up. We can get Zach on it because I am at Kirk Cousins is good. Yeah, at least he's a veteran. That's what you can say, and that's probably benefited Jefferson in terms of, we talked about that before, or up and down Drew, quarterback consistency. He's at least had that, even though Cousins is not that next level guy.
He's also had a number one guy next to him in Adam Thielen. He's had a veteran to lean on, and who is Jeudy had to lean on? A fellow rookie in KJ Hamler.
Mm-hmm. Let me see here. I think I found what I was looking for on Drew. So in the meantime, let's grab Dave here. Good to see you, Dave. Definitely has become a Super Chat superstar here at MHH. We really appreciate you, my friend. Yes. 2021, says Dave, Sutton, Jeudy, Hamler equals Three Amigos 2.0. The Broncos have had some pretty good 2.0 versions of the Three Amigos. Like, you look back at Thomas, Welker, and Decker. That was I think probably the first Three Amigos 2.0. So to me, this would be Three Amigos 3.0. But your point remains very valid, Dave.
And I saw someone in the comments, I believe it was Brian, who said, it's not a 20-game season, so don't think that three guys can get you 1,000 yards. How is that so unbelievable? Herbert is going to throw for he's over 4,000 right now. So that's 3,000 yards with three guys. Then you pepper in the KJ Hamlers and the running backs. To get to 4,000 with 3,000-yard guys is not that out of the realm of possibility. I think it could happen next year.
Yeah, it's not as common. You see 2,000-yard receivers here and there, and even the Broncos had 2,000-yard guys in 2016 with Simeon. Believe it or not, both DT and Sanders got over 1,000, and you saw it each and every year. Peyton was here. Well, maybe not 2015 now that I think about it, but nevertheless, 3 in the way the passing game, the proliferation of the passing game, it's not outside. Here's what Fangio said. The question was kind of posed to him about Drew's accuracy versus the Chargers, and then he ended up dropping a nugget here that it's worth everyone's attention. He said, quote, "I thought he made a lot of good throws. Obviously, his numbers would be better if we'd caught a few of them. I thought he made a lot of good throws. I thought there was some throws that could have been a little more accurate, but I haven't lost my enthusiasm for Drew at all. I think he can be a good quarterback in this league. He's shown flashes of it, and he's shown periods and stretches of it. We just have to become more consistent."
There it is again.
Quote. Your thoughts on that, Zach?
It's honestly mirrors what we've been saying on this podcast for months now, if not over a year, when Locke made his debut last year. I mean, he's shown flashes of, I would stop short of brilliance, but of being a potential franchise guy. You saw it against the Chargers in the first game, Miami, the Patriots game, if those catches were catches. And like he even said, he has to get some help out from his receivers because his stat line would have looked a lot better yesterday if Jeudy would have just done his job as a wide receiver, and the result would have been different. The touchdown that he dropped was literally the difference in the ball game. So when he gets that help out and he settles down as a quarterback, you will see him become more consistent. And when he's more consistent, he can be a franchise guy. It's all these dominoes that have to fall. But his supporting cast around Drew Lock, the receivers, the running backs, the offensive line, and the coaching, that has to line up too.
Caleb on YouTube, he says, so if we're keeping Locke and Fangio, what do you guys expect might be different in the coaching staff next year? All right, Zach, so if you're betting on it, if you're telling a throng of thousands of Broncos fans who listen to this podcast every single day, what do you expect to see change, if anything, with the coaching staff in 2021?
I will bet, I'm going to just say this to hedge my own bet. I will bet $100 right now to anyone's favorite charity if Tom McMahon is not fired as the special teams coordinator of the Broncos this offseason. I think if there's one pink slip that has to be issued, it is McMahon. And like we mentioned yesterday, there's always a scapegoat. Last year was Scangarello. The year before that, it was Vance Joseph. There's a system. It goes from assistants to coordinators and then to finally the head coach and maybe the GM. So McMahon will be the scapegoat this year. I think Pat Shurmur stays. Donatell is obviously staying, and the rest is pretty much unchanged. But McMahon, bye-bye.
I agree, and I think the only wild card is whether or not the Broncos make a decision to do something different at offensive coordinator, but I would be stunned if they do. I really would. I think that if this had been a regular offseason where Pat Shurmur had all the reps, all the preseason, a traditional training camp, and you still got these results, I'd be a lot less bullish on the idea of him coming back this year in terms of the way the Broncos are viewing it. But I think they view the situation with Shurmur very similar to the way they view it with Fangio, which is this is a mulligan season.
Yeah, and they have to take everything into consideration that maybe the reps lost, maybe that impacted Locke and Shurmur, maybe that they need another year together. I think the continuity aspect, they keep referencing it, Chad. No matter who it is in the organization, Elway, Vic Fangio, you can tell consistency. And this is something that Mike Kliss reported when it was reported that Vic Fangio was staying. He mentioned continuity among the coaching staff, and that extends to the quarterback as well. So I'm with you. I'm really surprised if Shurmur's gone.
George Fox on Facebook. Good to see you, my friend. Thank you for the question. Thank you for being with us tonight. He says, do you think it's time to play Brett Rippon for the last game and save our players from injury that might happen? Plus, it might help our draft position. Zach, is there any way on God's green earth you're going to see Brett Rippon on Sunday?
Locke gets hurt. That's the only way he's going to enter the game. And saving them from injury, it's the last game of the year. They have 8 months off coming up. They don't have to play a football game. So I'm throwing everyone out there. It's evaluation purposes, and evaluation starts with the quarterback. You still have to know, once again, what you have in Locke. And these are precious, precious reps for Locke being a quarterback with the first string and going through another NFL game. You don't care about Brett Rippon when it's in comparison to someone like Drew Lock.
All right, let me just take a quick look here, John. I'll tell you where I'm at in the timeline. So I'm sitting here at 6:45 on the stream, just FYI. And what I see on the Superstars, the last one is Based Gaze. So let's get that second one from Based Gaze if you've got it. Appreciate you, Based Gaze, with the Adam Gase meth gaze, I guess, right? The meth eyes. Bringing in competition defeats the purpose of evaluating Lock. Why take away reps as well? Got to go all in on Lock or move on. You can't go both ways. And this is an opinion that I agree with to a point. For example, I think the Broncos will and should tinker with the quarterback position, keeping Drew as the starter, but bringing in a more proven fail-safe. Let's face it, Jeff Driscoll was not a fail-safe, right? He was like he was not a guy that you could. They liked his upside, obviously. I think we know this. This is something Eric Trickle reported way back. What was it, 2016 that Driscoll entered the NFL? Either way, I can't remember the exact year, but the Broncos liked him. And so they had a chance to bring him in, and they thought maybe they could, develop him a little bit. And, if what's the worst that could happen? Drew's going to be okay. That was a fluke with the thumb, and they ended up paying a big price for it. This time around, Zach, they need to bring in a proven guy like a Fitzpatrick, all right, someone like that to do three things: serve as the, just being just good enough to push Lock, but not necessarily as he talked about base case, threaten him. Be that mentor, right? And then really be the fail-safe. Be a guy that you could actually count on to win games if Drew did go down. Or, football gods forbid, Drew doesn't turn the corner in year 3 and you realize this isn't going to work out. You got a guy that you can sit Drew down and say, all right, let's go win some games with a veteran who is competent.
I agree with Base Case, and this is kind of why I pushed for the Broncos to bring in a Jeff Driscoll in the first place. Like you mentioned, not to have someone that can threaten Lock's status either on the field or emotionally, psychologically as the understood quarterback for the season. You want to have a better option. I agree with that. Whether that's a rookie or a veteran, I don't know who that's going to be. I could see, again, a situation playing out where Locke gets dibs on the starting job next year, but you have someone waiting in the wings, whether that's a rookie quarterback or whether that's someone like Fitzpatrick or Andy Dalton. I think you will see an upgraded quarterback room, but it's Locke going into next year who has, I think, the first shot at being the guy for 21 as well.
By the way, for what it's worth, the Red Rifle, I mean, the Cowboys put up 37 points. Now, granted, it was the Eagles. But, he moved the offense. And of course, that offensive coordinator, I just had a space, Zach, the former
Kellen Moore.
Thank you. Kellen Moore, he's going to be a hot ticket, even though the Cowboys are not a real factor this year, even though they could still win the NFC East. As you detailed to me last night, Zach, it's unbelievable. They could win it at 7-9. But nevertheless, he could end up being a young, hey, we want to find the next Sean McVay, and it could end up being a guy like Kellen Moore where teams come out of the woodwork. It wouldn't surprise me, but I'm digressing here. My point is Andy Dalton showed that you give him a decent scheme, you give him some good coaching, and he can go out there and put some points up, even though it's, it is the Eagles.
Yeah, you know what? The thing about Andy Dalton is they're on a 3-game winning streak right now because of him. I mean, he's playing great ball. He has that offense humming. They had 200-yard receivers yesterday and a 100-yard running back, and that was due to having someone under center with Andy Dalton's prowess. And what's great about him or Fitzpatrick, they're okay with being backups. Some guys like Joe Flacco do not want to be behind a young quarterback. They want to be the understood guy, whereas Fitzpatrick is okay being even the late game guy. He's okay coming in for the fourth quarter, winning a game, and then going back to being the backup. Andy Dalton is as well. I would not mind having them with the understanding they're going to be the backup going into the season. It might not end that way, but it's Locke's team to start.
I'm going to grab this from Willie, but John, just so you know, the stream jumped. I need Kenneth again, Burn the Guitarist, a couple from Dave Vega, and then I got Willie here and his super chat. Willie, though, he has 2 points I want to grab. He says 104.3 The Fan made a good point about Pat Shurmur with Drew Lock and Daniel Jones in New York the last 2 years. Pat Shurmur, the point, cannot develop a young guy. And then his super chat, thank you, Willie, is Jeudy is the only number one of those three. So the point, though, and thank you for the super chat, my friend. The point that Shurmur can't develop a young quarterback, I think that's a little, I don't know, you might disagree with me on this, Zach, but I think it's a little hot takey because, look, if you look at the stats that Daniel Jones produced as a rookie, it didn't translate to team wins for the Giants, but 24 touchdowns. I mean, he had a couple of games with 4 touchdown passes. Daniel Jones, okay? Then you go back a little further, and granted, in Minnesota, Case Keenum was more of a journeyman by the time he got under Pat Shurmur's wing. But, he made Case Keenum an NFC championship caliber quarterback. Go back a little further to the one Pro Bowl season that Nick Foles had as an Eagle, 2013. That was his second year, and that was under Pat Shurmur. So it's not that he can't. Is he the right fit for Drew Lock? And that, at this point, Zach, is very questionable.
That's the good way to put it. And also about Jerry Jeudy being the only number one, I would disagree. I think as the season went on, it's clear that Jefferson is a number one in Minnesota. If that's what he was saying with that comment, he's also a number one receiver, and he's also putting up the stats, not dropping passes. But again, he has that veteran guy. The thing with Pat Shurmur, you wonder whether he's really stuck in the past, whether he's stuck with the Nick Foles or the Case Keenums, and he's trying to make Drew Lock into that. And Drew Lock is not a Case Keenum. Drew Lock isn't really even a Nick Foles. He's a little more mobile. He has a different edge to him. So can it be done? Theoretically, yes. But we saw more results come out immediately, Chad, with Scangarello last year in a shorter amount of time than we've seen through 16 games or whatever it is, 14, 13 games with Drew Lock as the Broncos quarterback this year.
Well said. Burn the Guitarist again. This 2 days in a row. It's good to see you. We appreciate the support. If you're on Twitter, make sure you connect with Zach and I, because we like to shout out the superstars after every show. I searched for you on Twitter last night after the gut reaction. Couldn't find anything, so reach out if you're on Twitter. He says, I feel like we have enough holes on our roster that we should take best player available outside of wide receiver. I do too, and especially Zach, if you're going with Drew as your guy in 2021, but what if that best player, your highest ranked guy, when you go on the clock, ends up being a quarterback? Right. Then you do have a philosophical kind of fork in the road. At that point, I would still take the next position available, whatever that second guy is, that's ranked.
Right. What if it's an edge guy, or when you have two edge guys, or what if it's a defensive tackle when you just paid Shelby Harris, or what if it's a tight end when you have Noah Fant? I understand the strategy, but the BPA targets, they have to be kind of confined to a few positions, and that would be the secondary, the offensive line, and, maybe, depending on how they feel, a quarterback. But cornerback, inside linebacker, those are the key positions to watch in the first round.
Hey, Vega jumping in again. Good to see you, my brother. Appreciate you. There's a couple times already tonight, so thanks, my friend. It means a lot to us. He says Parsons or Owusu. I can never pronounce this name correctly. Owusu Koramo. I can't pronounce.
Okay, that's what we're gonna call him from now on.
We'll call him okay. In the first, Mac Jones in the second. Hey man, we're all about on this podcast Micah Parsons in the first round if you can get him. The only other top option I would pine for the Denver Broncos would be one of the top corners, but Either one of those options would be just home run. It's exactly what the Broncos need.
Yes, they need that dynamic inside off-ball linebacker. They obviously need a cornerback. So whether it's Farley, whether it's Parsons in round one, I'm a happy boy.
Michael on Facebook, appreciate the question and you being with us. What do you think about the Dwayne Haskins release? So if anyone missed it today, breaking news from Ian Rappaport, the Washington football team cut bait with their first-round pick 2 years removed. I mean, not even 2 years, 1 year removed, 1.5 years, however you want to quantify it. Let me tell you my take, Zach, then I want to serve this over to you.
Yeah.
When you and I were at the Combine in 2019, we got a real up-close look at that entire quarterback class, including Drew, including Brett Rippon. It was really cool to have that insight and kind of see them going through their NFL prospect draft process. I came out of it extremely down on Dwayne Haskins, and I never was high on Haskins, even before that. So maybe you could argue that there was some confirmation bias involved in my evaluation. But let me tell you two things that rubbed me wrong about Haskins. Number one, just his overall kind of demeanor at the podium. Didn't love it. Number two, and this is an anecdote. I think I've shared it on the podcast before, Zach. I don't recall. But when I was flying back home, all right, I'm chilling at the airport at my gate. There's probably 25, 30 minutes till we're boarding the plane. And then all of a sudden, and by this point, if you've been at the Combine all week, you're seeing famous athletes left and right, famous coaches all over the place. It's nothing. But I'm sitting there at the gate, and then all of a sudden I hear this kind of bustle. All right. And I look back like this, and here comes Dwayne Haskins with one or two other Ohio State dudes. I forget which two now off the top of my head, but coming down for the gate, and they're surrounded by a small handful of kids. When I say fans, I don't just mean like 40-year-old dudes, big Ohio State alums wanting the signature of Dwayne Haskins. I mean, like kids, 11, 10, 11, 12, a few teenagers, probably 7 or 8 of them, all right, following behind him. Hey, Dwayne, can we get a signature? All right. Cut 2, he ends up walking right behind me to my gate. I'm like, oh, this dude's jumping on the same plane that I'm going to be on. He gets there real quick. He says, checks in briefly. Hey, this is my flight. Here's my ticket, blah, blah. All right, cool. And then the kids are just waiting patiently, right? And this whole time they've been trying to, convince him to sign, and he's basically just ignored them. Then he turns around finally and actually acknowledges them. Got nothing to do for 25 minutes, dude. Denies them. Says no. Now, look, as an athlete, as anyone who, famous people, all right, you're not obligated to constantly give your free time or your time away from whatever your profession is to fans constantly. But in that situation, you're there for the fans. It's a fan event, right? What does it hurt to take? It may be 30 seconds tops, Zach, to go through 7, 8 of those. Quickly signed Dwayne Haskins. Good to see you guys. I'm gonna go sit down, jump on my iPhone. It really was sad, to be honest with you.
I mean, you mentioned the 2 things that threw you off. Number 3 for me was Ohio State quarterbacks. And that's exactly why Fields kind of scares me as well. And it's just that program. It's that culture. I don't want to, name any names or point fingers, but it's just not conducive to NFL success at the quarterback position. I never liked Haskins either. And I think the release should have happened after he was busted at the strip club. And I think the only reason it didn't happen was because Alex Smith was injured. And they had Taylor Heineke, I think is his name, as the backup quarterback. He looked pretty good yesterday in relief of Haskins. It's no coincidence that Heineke looked decent, and then the next chance they got, they cut Haskins, and it's very, very well-deserved, Chad. That guy had way more chances than he ever should have had.
And it's sad because he really was, he grew up a fan of the Washington football team. Like, that'd be like anyone listening to this podcast now, growing up a Broncos fan, getting drafted by the Denver Broncos. It's the dream, but he wasn't ready. And I think he has enough talent to be an NFL quarterback. I never liked him, to be honest with you, but he just doesn't have it between the ears quite yet in terms of character, priorities, all that stuff, decision-making. Muhammad, MHH male model, jumping in with the super sticker. Really appreciate you, my brother. Good to see you. Another quick anecdote, Zach, on Dwayne Haskins. So when we load on this plane, right, we're boarding the plane, he ends up sitting in closer to the nose, right? So, and he ends up boarding in 1 or 2 spots before me in the groups, right? The board group 1, group 2, or A, B, whatever. So I'm on, probably the 3rd wave getting onto the plane. And as I walk down the aisle, on my right, I see Dwayne. He's sitting there, and he's right on the aisle. And as I walk by, he's looking at an iPad, right? Like this. He's got his headphones in, looking at the iPad. And as I walk by, I kind of just glance to see what he's looking at. My dude's looking at actual all 22 film of Baker Mayfield. Oddly enough. So I thought that was just an interesting anecdote.
He's a big fan of Baker Mayfield. I got to give a shout out to, because when you mentioned the things that are wrong with Dwayne Haskins, I was thinking, oh, that sounds familiar. I got to give a shout out to Bob Morris. He had a tweet today that Paxton Lynch lasted longer with Denver than Dwayne Haskins lasted longer in Washington. I thought that was really funny by Bob.
Indeed.
And a good point.
I mean, I think the next closest, facsimile of the Haskins situation is Paxton Lynch, because he was actually cut. So you could point to Josh Rosen in terms of being so quickly, sent away by the team that drafted him in the 1st round. But he was traded. They got something out of that. They didn't just cut bait. Like, they did get a pick in return from the Dolphins. Dave from Georgia, good to see you, my friend. Bona fide superstar. Really appreciate you. Hope you had a great Christmas, great happy holidays. He says, these kids had no real offseason. There were bound to be growing pains. Hopefully next year will be a little better. Do you think we go offense or defense, which his choice is defense, in the draft? Zach, as I've said it a few times now, the Broncos really went hard on offense the last, 3 drafts, I would say, exempting, take Chubb out of it at pick 5 in 2018. Most of those premium round picks, and when I say premium, that's rounds 1, 2, and 3, most of them were offense. And I think you see that talent out there. It's just got to come together. They got to develop. Meanwhile, you're seeing that the kind of lack of focus in the premium rounds on the defense has really haunted them down the stretch with all these injuries. They need to focus on D.
And think about it. What's the only realistic position they would take on offense in the first round? That would be quarterback. I mean, I think they're set at left tackle for sure, and I think they're actually higher on Elijah Wilkinson than we all think, fans and media think. It's got to be defense. It's got to be a cornerback or an inside linebacker in round one, depending who that guy is. I think they have to go that way. Like you mentioned, they've ignored it for too long, especially inside linebacker. They can't survive on the mid-round picks and the A.J. Johnsons of the world. It's a new era. It's a new NFL style and game right now. They need that three-down off-ball guy in the lineup.
Stu Meat, good to see you, my friend. Really appreciate you. If you're on Twitter, by the way, Stu, I keep trying to find you. And obviously, there's no Stu Meat on Twitter. So if you are on Twitter, connect with us. We'd love to be able to keep the conversation going. Shout you out after these podcasts. He says, I get it. Jerry needs to work on his hands, but I have come to the conclusion that Pat Shurmur isn't capable of developing Locke. Yeah, we have our misgivings on that same topic, Zach. We're not sure he's the right man, but we'll both be surprised if the Broncos end up moving on from Shurmur. Even if they say, look, on next Monday, a week from now, if they stand up there, Elway and Fangio, and they're like, look, we're sticking with Drew. Pat Shurmur, though, they're probably going to stick with him as well, as we've already said, but I'm not sure it's the right decision. Mike Shula, maybe he's a better guy in terms of young QB developer, resume. So maybe you hang your hat on that. You hope on that. You let Pat be the X's and O's, kind of where I'm the scheme guy, and Shula, you continue to do your thing and hope that he can reach Drew and help him get to that next level. And he does have a history of that. I mean, Cam Newton in 2015, that was his, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. That was his fifth year. So a couple more years down the road from where Drew is now. But Shula coached Newton to be the league MVP that year, crush every NFC team that even tried to come at the Panthers. I mean, they dominated the NFC in that playoff run. Broncos punched them in the mouth, and it was a different story. But Shula's got some wherewithal there.
Something that just came to me was if Elway in the front office is going to absolve, which they are, they're going to write off 2020 as a mulligan for Vic Fangio because of the injuries. I think they're going to do the same for Pat Shurmur. They're going to say the injuries and the pandemic and the lack of reps, we're going to give you another year. We're going to have continuity and be consistent with the coaching staff. And I as much as I don't like Pat Shurmur and as much as I don't think he is the right guy to develop Drew Lock or any other young quarterback, I could see why they bring him back. The only thing is Fangio, Chad, he has to take a bigger role next year. He knows year 3, it's do or die for him. He has no more mulligans left after that. It was always a 3-year plan, but now he's going into year 3. He can't just stand there on the sideline and leave it all in Pat Shurmur's jurisdiction and Mike Shula. He has to get in there. He doesn't have to be Bill Walsh, but just take a bigger hand in the game planning and maybe even some of the situational play calling with Pat Shurmur.
By the way, Travis, we're sorry to hear about your grandma. Just some thoughts, some prayers going out your way, my friend. That's not fun. I lost my grandma just a couple months ago, so I'm sorry to hear that, my friend. And we hope for the best. We hope maybe things can turn positivity, though. Prayers going your way, my friend.
Yes.
All right, John. Do we have? Actually, I'm going to grab our friend Black Knight real quick on Twitch. He likes to hop between Twitch and YouTube. Big Twitcher, by the way, big streamer on the gaming side, and very successful at what he's doing. He says, can Fangio actually do his job as the head coach? Let's see, can Fangio actually do his, I think as the head coach.
And be involved.
Okay, thank you. Can Fangio actually do his job with the expletive there as head coach and be involved in all 3 phases instead of passing his other 2 responsibilities to Shurmur and McMahon? If you ever do a show about roster management, please let me know. I'd love to join on that show. All right, man, we'll keep that in mind. But yeah, that's something. That's basically what Zach just addressed now.
Yeah, that was my previous point. I mean, I understand he's a defensive guy and he does a good job with the defense, but he can't just sit idly by and let his assistants call the shots. He is the head coach of the team. He's not the defensive coordinator of the team. He's got to take, whether it's Shurmur or another coordinator, he has to take a bigger hand in the offensive approach next season.
All right. Let me see where we're at. We're at 54 minutes. All right. Let me see here really quick. I know there was one from Flyfish Hunter. Good to see you. Real quick, John. Is that the same one that you have queued up? Okay. Flyfish Hunter, good to see you, my friend. We need a clips if you have a clips. You're the man. All right. Flyfish Hunter says, such a disappointing year, guys. 2 loser teams meet next Sunday. Who's going to come ready to play? Broncos or Raiders? Hashtag state of being. Well, it's a matter of pride, and I think you're going to see both teams play surprisingly scrappy, physical football. It's anyone's guess who's going to win this game. We'll reveal our official picks in the Mile High Roundtable on Friday, though.
You know what I said? The Chargers game was going to be a low-scoring, kind of sloppy game, and it was. I thought the Broncos would win, but it was still kind of the same. I think the Raiders game is going to be a shootout, and I know that sounds surprising. I can really see like a 40-35 final score, 35-32. I think a lot of points are going to be scored, but man, I watched the highlights of the Raiders game from Saturday, I think it was. They played the Dolphins. That offense can move the ball. And Darren Waller is a beast. I mean, he is just snatching souls out there. He lines up on the outside and just goes up and gets it in double coverage. He looks like Cortland Sutton. And you factor in Jacobs and they have Henry Ruggs. It's going to be an offensive shootout. But the Raiders, they're pretty tough when they're on, Chad. The offense, anyway.
I mean, they dismantled the Broncos in their first matchup earlier this year. I mean, it was brutal. True. But Derek Carr back in the saddle, went over 300 yards this week and fed his guys. And Jacobs, man, what a weapon he is.
Yeah.
Jacobs, and just the way things are, I've kind of changed my tune a little bit on drafting running backs in the first round if it's the right running back. Like some of these guys are just helping. They've been game changers for their respective teams, even though it's always, or I should say in most cases, it's short-lived. I mean, look at Zeke, for example, in Dallas, game changer when he first gets there. But eventually they hit that wall, the wear and tear of the tires and all that. That'll eventually happen for Jacobs, but he is just formidable. Eclipse, love you, bro. Good to see you. Hope you had a great Christmas, my friend, and we hope you have a happy new year. He says, peace and love from Philly. Let's go 2021. Hashtag MHHUN. Eclipse is definitely one of the OGs, been with us a long time. In fact, when Zach and I we worked for CBS Sports and we had MHH at 24/7 Sports, which is under CBS and all that. Eclipse was a guy that had just signed up for a VIP subscription, Zach, right when we ended up having to leave and going on to do and connect with Sports Illustrated and do our thing. He's been with us a long time, so at least now 2 years. So much love to you, Troy.
He is definitely an OG, isn't he, Chad? He's right out there next to Stu as the Mount Rushmore of the Mount Rushmores. We love you, Eclipse. Thank you.
George, the biggest Queensrÿche fan under the sun. Good to see you, my friend. Hope you had a great Christmas. Hope your daughter's doing okay. Hope you're back on the mend and all that. Let me know how you're doing, by the way. He says, thank you, Chad, Zach, and John, for all you do. You guys are the best. 2021 will be a better year for all of us, including the Broncos. Hashtag Denver Broncos for life.
Amen. Thank you, George.
Love you, George. Appreciate you, my friend. Dale Rude jumping in. Dale, are you on Twitter? I always think that I have your Twitter, but then it's Ren99, wherever. I don't think Ren's in the chat tonight, but Dale, reach out, connect with us on Twitter if you're on there. He says, Shermer has shown a lack of designing a system to utilize his players' talents. Agreed for the most part. He is improving, and I think more damage comes if we start over at offensive coordinator. And Zach, this was the philosophy that I had. And again, thank you, Dale. For most of this season, I was kind of like, might not be the greatest fit at this point. More time on task, give them more reps together. What do you lose? What are you forsaking if you end up starting over at OC in terms of continuing to hold back the potential development of Drew Lock? But I've kind of come around on that issue. I'm a little bit more open to the idea. If you have the right guy to step into it, it would have to be the right hire. You don't just fire him and go to someone else. Just fire him and go to someone else. It's got to be the right perfect fit and someone who believes in Drew.
That's exactly how I feel about it. I don't believe in changing for the sake of change, but in this day and age, I mentioned this yesterday, when you have to rebuild in the NFL, it's not like years ago where it takes multiple 3-4 years to completely turn it around and complete the rebuild. You can do it in the same season now. And I think the Cardinals exemplified that when they had Josh Rosen, and the next year they drafted Kyler Murray, number 1 overall. If it's the right person, whether it's a coach or a quarterback or whoever, if it's the right guy and you have the conviction and you feel good about it, go ahead and make that change. If they can get the next Sean McVay, and of course we don't know in the moment, it's all hindsight, But let's say they have the next Sean McVay lined up, or the next Joe Brady, the next Cliff Kingsbury. If it's the right guy for a lock or the right guy to develop a young quarterback, then yes, fire Shurmur. If you don't have anyone lined up, keep him in year 2 and hope for a marked improvement from Pat Shurmur.
Tom El Greco, good to see you again. Thank you, my friend. He says, how about Cam Newton as far as being the backup, if he's willing to take a backup role? I don't know, man. I doubt he'd be willing to come to Denver. A, B, that might be, he might still have even though he's struggled this year and he's been injured the last couple, I think he might have a little too much juice, to be frank with you, still in the locker room.
Am I the only one that's like annoyed by him? I mean, his kind of like, it was all cute when he was winning and he was like the MVP, but now with the hieroglyphics and the way he types on social media and all the different, the styles, the outfits, it's like you don't have that same cachet. You really can't pull that off anymore. I don't want the headlines. I don't want the drama. I don't want Cam Newton in Denver, especially as a backup.
Joseph on Facebook says, any chance KJ Hamler ends up having a better career than Jeudy? Hashtag state of being. There's always a chance, but I don't see it. I mean, he's a little guy. You know, Tyreek Hill's a unicorn. Let's face it. All right. Buffalo, you've seen them kind of find ways to use Isaiah McKenzie, who has a similar size profile as KJ and Tyreek, being those speedsters and the short area burst and all that. I mean, look at KJ. Tried to make a badass football move, going head first, trying to, cut between 2 or 3 guys to pick up additional yardage. Ended up with a concussion.
KJ can't win for losing, can he?
He can't, dude. And so I'm just a little bit concerned about his durability overall. But
yeah,
is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? No.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I will say, though, again, if you put the right coach in place, it's a shame, Chad, that KJ Hamler was wasted when he was healthy this season. He is a touchdown waiting to happen. He's a Deshaun Jackson type where he's a big play at any point of the field at any given time, and the Broncos ignored that. They ignored his skill set. I think Jerry Jeudy, and the level playing field, with stable quarterbacking and stable coaching, Jerry Jeudy has a better career. But KJ Hamler, I mean, you mentioned Isaiah McKenzie in Buffalo, but they have John Brown as well. He's a deep threat. He's a very, like what John Ross was going to be in Cincinnati. It's a very niche position, but if you nail that correctly, you can have longevity in this business.
All right, we got a few more supers left, and then we got to get out of here. So we crossed the 1 hour mark, so let's rapid fire these. Zach from Kenneth again. Thanks, brother. He says, what about trading back for Xavier Collins if Parsons is gone by our pick? How far back can we trade back and still get him? I don't know. I'm not sure. I haven't had my ear to the floor on Collins, to be frank with you. What I would say is, Kenneth, I'll copy and paste that question. Ask Nick, ask Carl, who they've been scouting the draft, keeping tabs on the profile and the stock of each and every one of these guys entering the 2021 draft. Ask me in 2 weeks. Seriously, in 2 weeks, a question like this isn't going to be as left field for me.
I was going to say, where prospects are being ranked now on December 28th is not where they're going to be on April 28th, whenever the draft is next year. So it's a little too premature to say. I wouldn't trade back for the sake of trading back. If there's a cornerback on the board, if Parsons is not available, I go for the cornerback. But we'll see, like Chad said. Ask us again in a few months. We'll have a better answer.
John's telling me, for what it's worth, he thinks he remembers Nick Kendall saying something like 18 or 20. You need to be around pick 18 or 20 to land him. Bama X jumping in. Good to see you, my friend. And I just realized today on Twitter we are connected, which is good. So we'll be shouting you out after the show. He says, if the issues with Jeudy remain the same at the end of year 2, be smarter than the Raiders were with Amari Cooper. Don't wait. Trade him while the stock is still moderately high. LOL. Perhaps. I feel you, my friend. But I really don't think it's going to come to that, Zach. I think Jeudy is – he just needs to get out of this season and go get some time away from football for a minute, recenter, come back, attack it with Drew or whoever the quarterback's going to be. I think by the time we get to this point next year, I don't think fans are going to be even thinking about the 5-drop game against the Chargers.
Well, I mean, you have to have a stock to have any sort of trade value, and right now Jerry Jeudy has no stocks. The reason that the Raiders dumped Amari Cooper was because he was still entering his prime, but he was already proven at the NFL level. He was already a wide receiver 1, and they got a first-round pick for him. Don't say these things yet, guys. Don't think these things yet. I promise you, this was an outlier-type season for Jerry Jeudy, and so many involved in the Broncos, he will have a much better bounce-back year in 21.
Willie again. Thanks, Willie. He says, let Mike Shula call the plays on Sunday. It couldn't hurt. Yeah, I mean, the problem with that is if you're going to let Mike Shula call the plays, you've cut Shermer off at the knees and
Right.
emasculated him basically. And then what's the point of keeping Shermer? So we feel you. We'd love to see it, to be frank, Willie. We would love to see Mike Shula call the plays, but it's just very unlikely to happen in terms of practical reality.
You run the risk of Mike Shula looking better than his boss. And then what do you do with Pat Shermer? You have to fire him. It just creates more dissension where you don't need any. But let me tell you, if Pat Shermer was a decent coordinator, Mike Shula would already have input, Chad, in the play calling, or at least the game planning. So we hope that's the case.
Kenneth Booker again, jumping in to say, can we pay Chad Kelly to break into Shermer's house every Sunday and unplug his alarm clock? Then it devolves onto Shula no matter what.
Yeah, but the problem is Pat Shermer has a Roomba in his house, and Chad Kelly, he wouldn't go anywhere near that.
Hey, man, Chad Kelly does have a proficiency for walking into people's homes in the dead of night dressed like a Disney, Pixar character. So don't put anything past this cat. He's got skills. Joseph, appreciate the super chat, my friend. We got you on Facebook. Now we got you on YouTube. You're the man. Really appreciate that. He says, are K-Jack, Kareem Jackson, and Justin Simmons locked into their starting positions next year, or do we move on from one or both? Hashtag state of being. I think the way the Broncos end up ultimately, Zach, because K-Jack's under contract next year, but I think the way they ultimately end up approaching K-Jack's situation is contingent on how the Simmons situation resolves, which is why I think this time around the Broncos are going to attack the Simmons sitch with a lot more urgency, whether they end up tagging him again or agreeing to a long-term deal. I think you're going to get that quite early in the offseason calendar so that they can then turn their attention to K-Jack. I would be stunned, Zach, if K-Jack comes back on the same contract that he's got, because he's set to make a $10 million base salary next year. And, K-Jack of 2019 was worth every nickel of that type of a salary, but a box safety that's, fair to middling in coverage and getting longer in the tooth by the second, not worth that money. So it really just depends, but I see one of them coming back, and his name is Justin Simmons.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? I think we've seen the best of Kareem Jackson as well at safety with the Broncos, which was last season. It reminds me a lot of the downward curve that Darian Stewart went on with the Broncos. He was so good, even TJ Ward to an extent. They were so good at safety, and they fell off a cliff in their last couple of years. And that's what happened with Jackson this year. Good against the run, but really not good in coverage. He whiffs too much on tackles, and he's too expensive. They can't devote $25 million, whatever it is next year, to one position at safety. I think Simmons will come back on a long-term deal, not a market resetting deal. And Kareem Jackson, you don't take a pay cut, see ya. We'll get somebody else.
Yeah, and I think the one, I agree, and I think the one outlier here that could kind of be a wrinkle is that K-Jack is a personal favorite of Fangio. And so I think Fangio could potentially, like, let's say the Broncos were thinking the way we're thinking. And they're like, hey, K-Jack, we want to keep you around, but not at $10 million. If Fangio were to try and step in and strong arm that and say, no, I need this dude, I want him back, that could be a game changer. But that's still a big if.
Yeah, I don't think he would die on that hill for Kareem Jackson,
Manny Wise, good to see you, my friend. Longtime listener, longtime superstar. Appreciate you. Hope you had a Merry Christmas, my friend. That goes for all of you, and happy holidays. Manny says, who should run the special teams next season? I don't know. Dude, I don't know. I don't have a Rolodex of special teams guys off the top of my head, but I'll tell you this. In a week's time, if they do end up moving on from Tom McMahon, I'll have that Rolodex ready to roll for you guys, and I'll tell you exactly who the best candidates at special teams are going to be for the Broncos at 2021. But I'd be lying to you if I told you to pretend to know who the top up-and-coming special team guys are, because here's the thing you got to keep in mind. Whoever they hire is a guy that either just got fired or his head coach, I should say, got fired, right? Or it's an underling. It's an assistant on specials, and like a Brock Olivo, the way he landed here back in 2017. So good question, Manny. Don't have an answer for you right now.
And anyone, Manny, you, me, Chad, anyone is better than Brock Olivo or Tom McMahon has been. And you know what, Chad, I'm with you. I don't really know the candidates, but you know who I'm not going to ask for recommendation? That's Pat McAfee. I'll do it on my own. He gave us Tom McMahon, too. I mean, that was the Colts connection as well. So no more. He's cut off.
Tony, good to see you, my friend. Discount Audio and Wills out in Los Angeles. Appreciate you, my friend. He says, if Fangio falls flat next year, would you like Mike Munchak to take over and maybe Vic get demoted to defensive coordinator? I just don't think you'll see that happen. Vic, Vic. Hey, dude, Vic Fangio in the house with us. You don't see that happen in the NFL nowadays, and I would be stunned. By the way, I was never high on Mike Munchak anyway. I talked to a few people in in the biz who got me a lot closer to liking the idea of Munchak. A few players, former players of Munchak, and a few guys who covered Munchak in Tennessee. But I just don't know what he brings to the table aside from organizational skills and O-line acumen. But then again, you could argue, Zach, maybe that's what the team needs, is they need that lockdown, ironclad organizational guy to, make sure everyone's doing their job, hold everyone accountable, make the right decisions and calls on game day.
Well, I don't want another career assistant being my head coach. I'm going through this with Fangio. I want to replace him with a real head coach, a deserving head coach who's all three sides of the ball. But my other question was, in reference to this question, has that ever happened before? A head coach stepping down to work for his successor? I don't think that's ever the case. I mean, I know coaches get fired, they come back like Mike McCoy a few years later, but that's a lateral move. I don't know if that's ever happened before. If it has,
it hasn't been in recent times.
Right.
I mean, if it has happened, and there might be a better scholar of the NFL than myself that might know something that I don't, but I know a lot about NFL history. Nothing's coming to mind off the top of my. I don't know. There's something bothering me about Buddy Ryan, but nevertheless, the point remains in modern NFL times. You just don't see it happen.
Even Chet, real quick, even Kubiak wouldn't come back to be coordinator. He wanted to be head. I mean, he wouldn't take a downward position.
Yep. Yeah, that's true. That's a good point, my friend. All right, guys, we do have to dip on out of here. Thanks to each and every one of you for giving us some of your time tonight. Mile high salute to our Super Chat superstars, our Facebook supporters, those of you giving us stars on Facebook as well. It all adds up and makes just a huge, huge, huge difference. Trust us on that. Albert, good to see you, by the way. Definitely a supporter. Hops on a Super Chat now and then. Good to see you. Hope you had a great Christmas, my friend. But we got a dip for now. Zach and I, we would love to keep the conversation going, guys. We're doing this 24/7, covering your Denver Broncos. And we get an hour here on the stream every day. Zach and I, anyway, 4 days a week for us. But we're doing this constantly. So if you want to connect with us, keep the conversation going, talk about the topics, get our insights on this or that, whatever, connect on Twitter, starting with the pod, @HuddleUpPod, and then also the main account, @MileHighHuddle on Twitter. That's where you get the breaking Broncos news and analysis. Any content, any news, any analysis is coming from that Twitter. And then our personal accounts, Zack Kelberman on Twitter, @KelbermanNFL, myself, @Chad and Jensen. Connect with us. We want to see you there. And then also, so many of you have done this. It's been great to see, but we want even more of you. We want all of you to head over to milehighhuddle.com, create a free account, comment on every article. If you read a piece from myself or Zach or one of the other guys, and you disagree with a take, you disagree with a premise, or you just want to get something off your chest, that's where you do it. We want to hear your takes and your views constantly. So head on over there, gang. And then in the meantime, Zach and I are off tomorrow night, but you'll have Nick and Carl for Building the Broncos, 6 p.m. Mountain, 8 p.m. Eastern. And then Zach and I will be back in the saddle Wednesday. So Zach, have a great start to your week, my brother, and sign us off.
You know what, guys? I know it's the last week of Broncos football, and it feels merciful. It's been a long year, but I'm looking forward personally. I know come this time next week, I'm going to already miss football. I'm going to already going through withdrawals and wanting Broncos football to be back. But just enjoy it, guys. When we see you next, we'll have more to talk about for the Raiders game. And let's just take this one day at a time and appreciate the fact it's still Broncos football, and we have something to talk about for this year as we wind down to what will be a much better 2021 professionally and on the field. So thank you, guys. We'll see you Wednesday. And as always, go Broncos.